Welcome, Palladium fans. We are back with another one of these interviews with Kevin. Today, we're going to be talking about you as a gamer. And next time we'll start talking about like the game design and such. But we got to get our foundationals out. Kevin, thanks for joining us again. Like this is just a wonderful time to get to hang out and hear your stories and see where you kind of like where you developed and where you came from and what was percolating and how we got to Palladium Books.
Well, people, whenever we do interviews, people always ask a certain number of same questions. And when I run into fans, I hear a lot of the same questions. It was actually, I think, Sean or Chris Landauer who said, we should memorialize a bunch of this while Kevin still has his faculties. So that's what we're doing, and it's fun. It's fun tripping down memory lane.
Yeah. If you guys didn't watch the first one that we released, where we Kevin talked about his time as an artist in the industry and his love of art and kind of where that came from and how it fed into Palladium Books, go check out the first video here on the Palladium YouTube channel. But all right, so let's talk about gaming. So not you as a game designer, but you as a gamer. This is probably the number one question that all RPG interviewers ever ask the people they're interviewing. But how did you get into gaming?
So I'm not a gamer like probably you, JM, or Eric Wojcik, or Sean Robertson, or Carmen Belair, and a gazillion other gamers that I know who, play everything under the sun, from video games to board games to role playing. I was more of a comic book movie guy, but I always enjoyed games, especially certain games. I played like the classic stuff when I was a kid, Monopoly and various other kid games. And then my first big game revelation as far as published games came was something I'm sure everybody knows.
Oh, yeah.
Love Risk. I fell in love with Risk. And I was so good at it. The very first game I played, I was playing with a couple of guys in their 20s. I was like 17, I think, or 18. And I won the game, and they were making jokes that it was beginner's luck. And I just, we ran out, bought the game, and I was playing with my brother and my best friend, Alex Marcinison, and sometimes my cousin, and sometimes some other friends. And I won 32 games in a row. And they came up with a rule where the first thing you do is you wipe out Kevin. You remove him from the board. And
there are certain people I play with that have a very similar rule. There's just enough luck in Risk. Did you ever play Diplomacy?
A long time ago.
Like, I've never been able to play Diplomacy with the same exact group of friends because there's no dice.
Right.
But as long as you have dice, most people don't take it as like, somebody lied to me and therefore I lost the game. But I've always had sort of a magic touch with Risk dice. I don't know what it is, but I empathize there. Oh wait, you guys are all just I'm gonna spend the first several turns of this game just getting annihilated and then watch you guys. Oh, all right, well.
But even that can be fun because we would allow alliances in Risk.
Oh yeah.
Or at least temporary ones in Risk. And and people would be rolling away, and I would just sit there and with my strategy, and I'd be like, I don't know, you sure you want to build up your armies there and attack me? Because Alex's forces are getting pretty big, and he's right on your border, and I know he's your ally, but sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't.
Right. Play the players, don't just play the game. That's the key to winning almost any game.
And I had fun with Risk. I would challenge myself where, at first I was always the guy in America. And then I'm like, that's that's kind of easy. And everyone's like, oh, you can never hold Europe. And I'm like, oh, never
See if
tell
I
me
can
you
do
can't
it.
do
Yeah.
something. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. I love Risk. That was my original game. Still has the wooden pieces, and great. And then another game that I fell in love with, which sounds horribly boring, but is a wonderful game.
Acquire.
Avalon Hills Acquire.
I have that game on my shelf.
It's just so good. It really is. And the concept is, like I said, it sounds terrible, where you're acquiring uh, hotel chains.
Yep.
And sort of like Risk, ultimately, you're trying to take over your competitors and buy them out and be the last guy on the board. But it's so much more fun. And then there's that
Yes.
element of chance and but a lot of strategy. And it's a great game. Kevin Long and Wayne Smith and Steven Shearing and Alex and and my kids, we play it all the time. It was just a great game. It still is a great game. It just yeah.
It's also one of those games that does not look visually appealing to anyone who, except the people who are actually playing the game. Because when you're playing, it's just
Yes.
laying down they almost look like Scrabble tiles, but there's no rhyme or reason.
Right.
You can't
Right.
intuit what's going on.
It looks
Except
very
everybody
much
in the game is like, I'm intently focused on it.
Yep. Yep.
So you mentioned in the notes, and I wanna tease this out here. Risk inspired Palladium, the Palladium system a bit, or at least there was a kernel of inspiration from all of your years of playing Risk.
The combat system is a variation, in my mind, anyways, or certainly inspired by Risk, because you roll to attack, and then because in our game system we have opposed rolls, so the attacker rolls to strike, the defender gets to roll to defend, whether it's a parry or a dodge. The high roll wins, just like in Risk.
Yeah.
And I just really liked that element of the game, and I found ways to incorporate that concept into our combat system. That and boxing.
Okay. I think one of the great things about a system like that, and I mean, we've talked about how I'm a huge fan of it, is it it sort of means that in a lot of cases, it's always potentially your turn to do something. So you
Yeah.
lose oh, well, I went on 17. I'm going to sit around and wait until 17 comes back up again. And it removes kind of that, I think, very natural human tendency to wait around for our turn and do something else. In the Palladium system, if you get attacked, you're rolling dice and you're right back in the narrative of the combat.
Oh, absolutely. And that's part of the beauty of it. And because it is so interactive, when someone rolls a natural 20 and makes a kill shot, or knocks the bad guy out, or rolls a 20 and makes an amazing grab to rescue the child falling, or the magical device that will save the world. I've had the entire table of players jump up and cheer.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't get that in a lot of other games. I mean, it's just because that momentum builds up, because it's like, oh, and also, I mean, it's cool too. Like if your hero, the guy who's locked in combat, and, he's down to his last, 10 hit points. And it's like the last two rolls were like terrible. And I was like, oh no. And then he just like sucks it up and has that moment where it's like, and he rolls a natural 20. Or some other high roll, and wins the combat, finishes off the bad guy, and it's like, oh, I mean, it just has that feeling of triumph.
Oh, yeah.
And that gets into the design elements we'll talk about later, but I want that visceralness. I want that story element. I want that dynamics. I want, just like same thing when you're watching a great movie or reading a great book, and the hero suddenly does something that's ingenious or makes that killing blow, and you're just like, yes, I wanted that in the game.
Yeah.
So
So I've always said the difference between role playing games and every other game is if you've played Risk, you may remember that one really great Risk game where you dominated the board, or you had that one lone guy in Kamchatka who held out the entire game, couldn't roll anything but sixes on defense. But that's it. Like you're like, I remember I played Risk. When you play a role playing game, you're like, no shit, there we were. Kevin saved my life from the dragon. Like it's a shared
right.
memory that only really you guys at the table it's real for. Like we share our stories, but it's only really a memory for the people who were there throwing dice at the time.
Well, and it feels like a real memory.
It does.
I mean, it feels like, yeah, I was there. I mean, it was funny because we've been working on uh, the Yinsloth Jungle and the Yinsloth Expedition. So Yinsloth Jungle came out last year, and I thought Expeditions would follow it immediately, but then all kinds of turtle stuff happened and life happened. And anyway, I'm working on it again now, and this is what June 2024. So I'm about 2/3 of the way through, and it's looking great. And but the guy who worked on it also took a shot at Land of the South Winds, and a few people have taken a shot at it. And part of the problem has been, I'll read these manuscripts, and I'm like, but this isn't it. I know because I was there. Because of the filers, played there,
Yeah.
gamed there. We had adventures there. And it's like, I know what it is, but trying to convey that to others has been a challenge. Sean has decided that that's the game that I have to, or the source book that I have to write. So we'll see. I'll probably incorporate things from a couple other manuscripts because there's some good stuff there. But yeah.
Now, when you were in your mid-teens, you took your first stab at actual game development, but it was a board game, a miniature game, like the Tank Warfare.
Yeah. So I think the gaming bug was always there for me. So we were watching, Alex and I were watching an episode of the Avengers. This was not Marvel's Avengers.
No.
This was
The British spy.
United Kingdom spy show, right, with John Steed and Mrs. Peel. And we loved that show. And it was just this great show. And one of the episodes, they had war games. The guy was playing war games, and we saw how they would move these figures and vehicles and stuff around. And Alex and I got the idea that he is a big World War II historian, and had a lot of interest in even then. So we basically created our own little war game with tanks. We created our own terrain out of beeswax. Alex got that idea to make a beeswax thing, and that was pretty cool. And it was just awesome. And we had a bunch of these little scale. I forget who made the miniatures, or there were little toy type things. But we had Panzers and whatever, and we played both European and Japanese campaigns, and it was great. It was a lot of fun. We just made stuff up, and I'm a goof, so I can't say it was real serious. I mean, the rules were kind of serious, but I'd be like, all right, now I'm attacking, kind of thing. And it's like, okay, so kind of childish, but it was fun. But we had real rules. We measured things, with rulers and that kind of thing. So it was fun. We came up with ranges for the various weapons and cannons and tanks. We came out with, I don't know what we called it, but basically armor ratings.
Yeah.
And for armored vehicles, and we played a bunch of great. We played that for years.
So then how did you make the transition from sort of board game, war game, even light-ish, into kind of what was your first experience with role-playing games?
So role-playing, you can thank the existence of Palladium Books on Julius Rosenstein. Without Julius, none of this would ever happen. So Julius discovered D&D, and he went crazy over it. In fact, he was one of those guys who immediately jumped into role-playing games. He was bringing all kinds of crap that would come out, and he was just, oh, Kev, role-playing, it's great. And he was part of the Waynew Gamers.
Okay.
At Wayne State University. He had long since graduated, but he could still go there and participate in those kind of things. And he was telling me about their group, and there's a lot of cool stuff going on. And he just kept saying, you got to play, you got to play, you got to play. Kevin, you would love this with your imagination and your storytelling. You're just a natural for this. And to be honest, I thought it sounded stupid.
Well, thank you.
I just wasn't interested in it, but Julius was very excited about it, and he got a couple other 2-3 other people at work. We were working at an art supply store, the perfect place for a would-be artist, right? 20% discount.
That's right.
First to take advantage of sales, So he convinced a bunch of us that we should play, and he said, you should play. There's this game that I'm in that's really fun, and this guy's a really great game master. So I think he kind of forced us onto this guy. And so my initial 2 games was with a gentleman named Johnny Hill, who recently passed. And I always thought Johnny was not a great game master, despite rumors to the contrary, because the 2 games I was in were terrible, and none of us had fun in his game.
Oh no!
But I think that was because, first of all the other players were like 3rd and 4th level, and we were 1st level. Mm-hmm. And in D&D, especially original D&D, you're just sissies. You're puny little runts that if an orc hits you really hard, slaps you hard, you're probably dead because you had a whole whopping 5 hit points and no armor, or, cloth armor, padded armor, or just soft leather armor, and it doesn't stop anything.
Yeah.
And so we'd be in a situation to be like, okay, I'm going to run forward and do this. And one of the other players would step forward and say, no, lowly little thief, I'll protect you. And I'm like, I don't want to be protected. I want to fight this guy. I want to do something in this stinking game other than watch you guys all do stuff. And in fairness to Johnny, I realized later that, first of all, he already had like 4 or 5 players, and Julius was having him add another 4 players. Not everyone can run a large group.
Yeah, that's a very specific talent.
Yeah, and I don't think he particularly wanted new players. So my first 2 games sucked, and I'm like, that's it. I knew it was stupid. I knew it was awful. Didn't know it was so boring, but I'm done.
Yeah.
And Julius said, well, you know what? Let me just run a game. I'll be the game master, and you let me run it for the 4 of you, specifically just for you, or just the new guys. And I'm like, that's it. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm not playing. Sorry, Jules. And he's like, no, come on, Kev. And the other 3 players are all like, well, Kev, if you don't play, we're not going to play. And Julius was just a sweet guy. And I'm like, what, that will hurt Julius's feelings so bad? And they're like, we don't care. If you don't play, we're not playing. And I'm thinking, what is this, grade school? I mean, we're all in our 20s. One of the guys was like 32. It's like, come on. So I'm like, fine. But this is my last game. So not only was Julius an amazing player, he played in virtually every play test I ever did. He was one of the original Defilers. Amazing player. He was also a natural game master. So we had the time of our lives, even when my character died, which was great because I was playing I forget if I was playing a thief I think I was playing a thief who was pretending to be a wizard. So I had carved up a staff with all kinds of meaningless symbols and images and shit. And because I knew I was going up against orcs, and they're a cowardly lot.
Yeah.
And superstitious.
And cowardly lot.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how Julius described him anyways, right? And so I'm like, I'd take my staff and like, beware the wrath of, whatever the heck. And Julius would roll to see if they fell for it or not. And more often than not, they did. And then the players weren't particularly thinking clearly, I think, because, back in those days, someone had to stay and hold the door. If you didn't have an iron spike or a wooden spike, the spike could open because doors automatically closed in that game system. And so this person would be holding that door and this person would be holding this other door. And who did they send in to check out the treasure chest? The thief. And so I make sure my cloak is over so they can't see what's going on. They can hear jingling and noise and whatever. And I'm like, they're like, so what's in there? It's like, oh, not too much as I'm stuffing my pouches. And, so I mean, I got a ton of gold. I got some cool little magic dagger. I'm like kicking ass and no one knows because I mean, they all suspect, it's like, why is Kevin's character walking slower now and jingles with every step? And it's like, you don't know.
You don't know.
I wouldn't steal from you, my teammates. So anyways, a bunch of gnolls are chasing us out of the dungeon. And we make it out of the dungeon. And I'm like, this is great. And then I open the dungeon door back open and I flip off the gnolls. With a giant size arrow.
Yeah.
I was down to like 4 hit points. And it did, I don't know, 10 or 12 points of damage. Julius is like, Kev, your character's dead. And I'm like, what? My character's dead. What? And he's like, well, Kevin, you guys made it out of the dungeon. It was really dumb of you to open up that door and to flip them the bird. And you had made it out. Why did you open the door? And I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. A game with consequences. I love this game. And the rest is history.
Oh, man. Oh, man. That's fantastic. Well, thank you, Julius, for your persistence. Because I think without that last game, I mean, we wouldn't be here. Palladium Books wouldn't be here. Wildly different parallel universe spun off.
Yeah.
At that point. So what do you typically in a game play? I know, I'm guessing you've probably play tested a lot of things, or you're the forever GM like me, which means you just kind of get to NPC everybody.
So in the few games that I play, I tend to like sneakier characters. So I like mages and thieves and assassins and those kind of things when I do play. But I don't play very much. I'm, like you said, the eternal game master.
Yeah.
Which is okay because I get bored if I'm just a player a lot of times, and it's depending on the game master and their style, and if I have lots to do. So if I don't have stuff to do, I start to get disruptive. I'm the player who's like, yeah, that's cool, but what's over there? Or what if we do this? Or did you say that guy is the head of the guards? I mean, I want to go over and see if I can steal his coin purse. And of course, if you fail, you just cause all kinds of trouble.
You cause havoc, which again is interesting.
Yeah. And I like to bluff and do things, which I came to realize that depending on the game master and the player group, a lot of people don't play like that.
Yeah.
I was playing with Sean Patrick Fannin. When he was play testing riffs for Savage Worlds, and I wanted to go and bluff the big bad guy, and he's like, "Well, you realize the guy's this powerful, and if you fail, he's going to kill you on the spot." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's okay." He's like, "But you could die," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's a one-shot game. I don't care. I'm going to take the risk. If it pays off, I'm the hero. And if it doesn't,
even in a campaign, I'm willing to take that risk because it'll be a cool story."
Right. So I go down, and sure enough, I was a mind melter, and the guy saved against my 2 rolls, and I'm out of ISP, and I'm like, and he's like, you're, and I'm like, oh shoot, and I thought I was dead, and then Wayne's character, who had been hanging back and was a glitter boy, rolled a natural 20 and blew the thing's head off.
Nice.
So right as he was about to kill me, and I'm like, good old Wayne.
That's right. No shit. There you were. Wayne saved you from. So let me ask you this: setting aside the Palladium system for a second, what other games stand out in your mind as like games that you enjoy, like RPGs that you enjoy the system or the setting that you've played in over the years?
I thought Bushido was a cool setting.
Okay. Yeah.
That's an old game most people may not have even heard of. I thought RuneQuest was cool.
I mean, I've got on this side. This is my RuneQuest collection here.
I haven't actually played a lot of other games. I would read everything. I've read everything that came out through the mid 1990s.
Yeah.
So I'm familiar with MechWarrior and
Vampire
and Sorcery and Vampire the Masquerade and all that stuff, Shadowrun.
Yeah.
And some more obscure games, but I didn't really play a lot. I was busy, running and designing my own games. But like I said, I would read everything and get people's input on stuff. Played a little bit of Champions, played a little bit of V&V, Villains and Vigilantes. Played Marvel superheroes a couple of times. Never cared for DC heroes.
I like books. I enjoyed reading the DC Heroes game. I don't know that I ever played the DC Heroes game.
Yeah, me either. Yeah. And then, I would look at a lot of the games, as from a design point of view.
Yeah.
And look at the good stuff. I always said, a good game designer steals the good stuff from other games and, tosses out the bad stuff. And so it was always interesting seeing what other game companies tried to do and why some stuff failed and why some stuff succeeded. Like when Shadowrun came out, it came out a year before Rifts. And it's like weird because all of a sudden there was just something in the zeitgeist where Shadowrun, Torg, and Rifts all had similar sounding concepts where, magic and technology together and, dimensional or time travel. And I'm like, oh no. And both Torg and Shadowrun came out before Rifts. And so the minute they came out, I grabbed a copy and I'm like, oh, thank God, this is nothing.
It's nothing like, let me make sure I do this the right way. No, I did it wrong both times. That's all of my Torg books right down there. I got the opportunity to work on some of Torg Eternity, and everyone's like, well, did you play original Torg? I'm like, no, see, my high school, I went to high school in Chicago, and for whatever reason, my high school was very split, and those splits were really strong. You either listened to Pearl Jam or you shoved Pearl Jam fans into lockers because you listened to the Smashing Pumpkins. You were a Cubs fan or you were a Sox fan. We didn't hang out. And in my role-playing club, you either played Rifts or you played Torg, and you guys didn't cross-pollinate, you didn't talk to each other, and I was clearly on the Rifts camp. And so I knew nothing about Torg aside from the general disdain I had for it because it wasn't Rifts. And now, obviously, I love a lot more games. What is it? Matt Colville says a good game master reads their rules over and over and over again. A good game designer reads everyone's rules as much as you can, because you copy and steal everything. You case it. That's what my wife calls it in her crafting world. You case it. You copy and steal everything because you'll read something and be like, ooh, this one nugget. This matches up with something in my head. And so the rest of the 500-page rule book, well done, but I'm going to steal this one thing and twist it a little bit and put it into my
Yep.
game.
Yeah, it's really not stealing; it's just being inspired by.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and most games will have, like you said, that one or two or three nuggets where you're like, oh, I never thought of that. That's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
wow, that's clever. Or man, that's a nice mechanic.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's true. You read everything.
So I feel like I can't not ask you about the Detroit Gaming Center because in all of the, it gets mentioned in a lot of your interviews. It's mentioned in the books. It was a foundational cauldron of gaming for, out of which, kind of like the Black Cauldron from Lloyd Alexander, Palladium Books kind of emerged out of this crucible. So, what was the Detroit Gaming Center, and how did you get involved there?
So yeah, I mean, what you said is absolutely true, which is why it's mentioned all the time. So Julius was a member of the Waynew Gamers, and he had met Eric Wojcik just by chance on a bus. He was reading some science fiction book that Eric had read. Both were voracious readers, and Eric walked up to him and said, "Yeah, what do you think of this book?" And they got talking, and so it's funny. I thought all these guys had been role playing for years, and because I didn't know when role playing came out,
Yeah.
and I thought they'd been role playing for years and had known each other for years, and they'd all just kind of met like 6 months before. But I didn't know that, and so Julius introduced me to Eric, and Eric, Johnny Hill, Robin Corona, a bunch of other folks were part of that crowd, and Eric was sort of the ringleader. And that was one of my next games that I played in after Julius. I played in one of Eric's games, which was also a lot of fun. Bigger group, and that was cool. And Eric and I just hit it off right away. We just instantly gelled on so many different levels and turned out to be like each other's muse. I only found out a couple of years ago that from one of our mutual friends. Well, when Eric first met me, he was like, "You gotta meet this kid. You gotta meet this kid. Everything gives him ideas. He's like amazing." And yeah, I never knew that. It was just cool. And so Eric and I would just spend hours and hours and hours on the phone and in person, just talking about everything under the sun and possible game applications and game theory and game applications and all kinds of stuff. And one of the things, and I was always, I think I was also always an entrepreneur at heart.
Yeah.
So Eric wanted to come up with something that was different, bigger, better than the Waynew Gamers. And I liked that idea. So he suggested creating something that he called the Detroit Gaming Center. And of course, I was all in. and Eric and I mean, we're the ones who found the facility that we ended up renting and came up with a lot of the basic stuff. And then there were like, I think there were 8 or 10 of us on the board of directors. And we just got the whole ball rolling. I'm the guy who suggested bringing in pinball machines and video game, stamping, arcade games, and also machines that sold like soda and stuff, so we could make extra money, and that worked out great. And then it was a fixer-upper. It was this big second floor, 10,000 square foot.
Holy cow!
Facility. Yeah.
Holy cow!
Yeah, it was huge. In fact, I've got a floor plan. It's got some of my notes in it, but I mean, it's it was gigantic, and
wow,
we're open 5 days a week, Tuesday through Sunday, and it was just great. And so, I mean, it took a lot to build it up. I mean, Matt Ballant pretty much single-handedly carpeted that whole frickin' place. And we set up the whole buy rules and all this, and everyone had to be a member, which was funny because I couldn't afford. They had special memberships, like for $100 you could be a lifetime member, and I was still poor, so I didn't have that money. So I'm on the board of directors. I'm like the number 2 guy, and I'm not a lifetime member. And one of the things that the filers surprised me with, like 6 months into our gaming, is I'm on my birthday or for Christmas, one of those, they all chipped in and bought me a lifetime
Oh, that's awesome.
membership. Yeah.
That's awesome.
But so the cool thing about the gaming center was that it was like a mini con every weekend,
Right.
and kind of in between, because I mean we would get 100 to 300 people over the weekend. That's a lot of freaking people. And this is before there's like stores running events and things. This is decades before something that happens. We also had a massive gaming library where like numerous people, particularly the Bartold family, they were huge into games, all kinds of games. And in fact, it was Ken or Tom who introduced me to Bartold, who introduced me to Acquire. And so we had this massive game library with like 500 games that you could take out and use and play there. And then you could reserve rooms to game in, and your group could come and play in these various rooms. And we had a ping pong table, and we had
that's awesome.
A big table set up for war games, and it was just everything. And it was just amazing. And then role playing was the hot thing. So that was our main emphasis. And so the cool thing was, with that many people coming through and that many people running games regularly, if a new game came out, somebody
was running it.
Yeah, and you got to see how it ran, or you could look through the book. Likewise, you got to see all these different styles of gaming. Like Eric was amazed because I would give my guys, if they were smart enough to get the information, they would know who they were fighting, who they were aligned to, what their alignment probably was, their estimated level of experience, if they had magic weapons, what they were, what they could do, et cetera, et cetera. And Eric was very much a mystery guy, and he kind of made the players, like, if you went through the dungeon, it didn't matter if you had been in level 1 9,000 times, you didn't have the map, the actual map that you had to draw out as he was describing stuff, you didn't know where you were going. And he was big into puzzles and figuring stuff out and mystery. And I ran it more like an adventure movie or comic book. So when you knew you were going up against Doctor Doom and who Doctor Doom was, or Doc Ock, or whatever, and and Eric said, "But Kev, where's the mystery?" And I'm like, "Because you know what you're going up against, Eric, but they've got this reputation and they've got all the cards stacked in their favor. So it seems, so even though they know all these details, it makes them even more nervous, and it creates even greater suspense, because it's like, holy shit, we're going up against Darth Vader."
Yeah.
It rather than, oh, it's some mysterious guy who's allegedly got powers and he's dressed in black and breathes heavy. It's like, okay, that's cool, but I'm going up against Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And so it was just this amazing place. I made a lot of friends there. Tons and tons of friends. I up until that point, I was getting out of my shell, but you wouldn't know it now because I'm a blabbermouth, but I was very shy. And even in some social situations, like, I'm not a great schmoozer. I go to a party and I'm the guy usually standing in the corner, not knowing what to say to who. And I only, like, in the last decade, realized the secret to meeting people at parties is walking up to them and going, "Hi, I'm Kevin Sabita. I design games. What do you do?" Yeah, great mystery. it took me most of my life to figure it out.
Yeah.
So it was just a lot of fun. You got to see, like I said, a lot of different styles, and so yeah, it really was like this crucible or hothouse where you saw everything so quick,
Yeah.
and plus role playing was new to me, and like I said, I didn't realize it was pretty much new to everybody, and so it's like, oh, what's JM playing? Oh, what's Eric playing? Oh, what is Pete Rogan playing? Oh, he's a Star Wars guy or Star Trek guy. How does that game work? What are those game mechanics? What's his style of play? It was just really, really interesting. And then I just started, running my D&D game, and that was, kind of a crazy experience because there were a lot of things I didn't like about the game.
Now, was that D&D game? Is that what morphed into the Defilers game and morphed into the, like, with the house
Yes.
rules, the Palladium fantasy game?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So again, without Julius, without me meeting Eric, without he and I and 6 other crazy people establishing a gaming center, the Palladium game system might never have happened.
Well, I know we can't talk about it today because I want to dedicate a whole discussion on, like, the Defiler campaign, because again, another one of those things where if you've spent any time in a Palladium book, you've seen the piece of art that's behind Kevin. There's the ballad of the Defilers. There's the Lord Coke. All of these people come from this root, and I want to do an entire episode dedicated to the Defilers. But you told me that, so this, you've mentioned this before. This was a 26-person D&D game.
Yeah, you were surprised.
Away.
Right. Well, eventually I had to, but yeah, you were surprised when you said, so that's the Defilers, and I said, well, half of them.
Yeah, I thought that was the whole Defilers, but that turns out to only be a portion of the group.
So what happened when I finally ended the game after 3.5 years? I gave them notice that I was going to be wrapping it up.
Yeah.
And one of the players said, "Hey, would you mind doing a group shot?" And I said, "Well, that's a ton of work, and because you're trying to depict these characters accurately, and there's 26 people. That's a massive piece." And I said, "I'll tell you what, if you guys, pay, like, I forget what it was, $25, $30. I said, I will, I'll draw your character, put them in the group, and then what I'll do is I'll watercolor all the other figures in like a sepia tone, and then do a full color on your character so he stands out."
Oh, that's cool.
And so the characters in that illustration are the guys who paid me the $25 or $30. And then I made it, and then I printed a bunch of them and painted them up and gave them out to them, and it was pretty awesome. It was a great idea.
That's very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, and those are like a lot of the main movers and shakers, but yeah, basically I felt bad turning people away, and my game quickly became the most popular game at the gaming center. In fact, some people, because there's certain clicks and stuff, and people are like, "Well, why does he get the second largest room every Saturday?" And it's like, because he's got 26 guys.
Yeah.
And half of them are lifetime supporters.
Yeah.
And he brings in all these people. He needs a big space, so shut up.
That's right.
It's one
also,
day.
he's on the board of directors, so.
Well, we tried to be fair, right?
Yeah.
But so yeah, I mean, the group started out with like 5 guys, and then it became like 10, and then it was like 18, and people would come in. And part of it, what started to attract people is they heard, one, that I was a killer game master. I killed players, which wasn't really true. I find players tend to kill themselves by either doing something incredibly heroic or incredibly stupid.
Your job as the GM is just to give them enough rope for the inevitable to happen.
You got it. And I try to save them when I can, or give them an avenue of escape. But if they don't take it,
yeah.
And then oddly enough, I had a reputation for having an X-rated dungeon, and that I would allow any character with any equipment in my game. Because a lot of people would say, "Oh no, you can't bring in this, you can't bring in that." So a guy would come in and say, "Hi, I'm a third level or fourth level, this or that. I've got," some of these guys were just like dripping in magic, and I'm like, "Yeah, fine, come on in." And of course, in the course of the game, I might mitigate a bunch of that because they get robbed, or they have to trade it away to save someone's life, or whatever the case might be. So those 3 or 4 things really attracted people, and then I think word kind of went out that I was running a game with a lot of story to it.
Yeah.
That was a thing so the thing that really appealed to me was the role playing aspect.
Yeah.
I love stories. I love characters. Eric said I make the best villains he's ever seen, and I'm like, well, second best, Stan Lee.
Yeah.
All
right.
But, and so I just really focused on the characters and the stories, and started to integrate little. And we'll talk more about this in the next view. But I started to integrate little things that to me just bugged the crap out of me, because they didn't make sense in the context of the game, D&D. And this is not to slam D&D anybody. I think D&D is brilliant. It created our whole industry. Anyone who says D&D is garbage is full of it, because it would not have lasted, going on 50 years now.
Yeah.
And and have millions of people have played it for all those years. I mean, there's something magical there. Give Gygax and Andrew who was it, Dave Arneson, their props. They created something special.
Yeah.
But that said, there was a lot of stuff I didn't like. Like, I'm a wizard, I cast my spell and I don't remember it anymore. It's like, what? And I realized at the time, looking back at it, it was just a game mechanic.
Yeah.
For how they saw it working, and and it wasn't a very good one, but that's what it was. And then the dungeon crawl, a lot of people poo-poo the dungeon crawl these days, but dungeon crawls are amazing. They're a lot of fun. Hell, gazillions of video games followed that pattern. You kick in a door, you kill or loot, you move into the next one and kick in a door and repeat.
Yeah.
For me, though, that was boring. And it didn't make sense. I kick in a door, our heroes go in, they beat up the bad guys, they either, tie them up or kill them, and then they loot the frickin' place, which again is like, thought you were heroes and you're looting the place, but okay, kind of barbarian hero types. I get it. But you're telling me the people or creatures in the room next door and the room across the hall
don't hear it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it didn't make sense to me. So I created a dungeon that felt plausible, and I started to incorporate what really breaks down to story elements, and then mechanizing them with rules. And that turned into that. And so Julius was one of my first players, and Tom Bartold and Ken Bartold, brothers. They brought in their friend Steve Shearing. All those guys ended up working, well, not Ken, but most of those guys ended up working for me in some capacity at some point in Palladium's history. But they were part of my original Defilers. And then other people would just hear about it and come in and say, "Hey, can I play?" And then I just ran compelling games and stories. Part of it, I would listen, and I think all good game masters do this. I would listen to my players, and then I would try to, roll with what they were talking about and give them the things that they were either anticipating or desiring to encounter. So, in fact, at one point, it got to when a new player would come in and say, "Gosh, I sure hope we don't run against and the rest of the players were like, "Don't say it," and they would say it. I'm like,
Excellent.
Like, damn it! Now we're going to run into this or that.
Yeah.
But
Well,
that's the fun of being the game master.
Yeah, I mean the technique I call it is the consequence list. Like I start the game and I'm just like, well, here's some fallout that will eventually come back to, and then by about the first or second month of gaming, I don't have to prep anything. Everything's on the consequence list. That's just sort of there was a great book, Writing the DC Comics Way, I think is what it was called. And it introduced me to like A plots, B plots, and C plots, and how they're all going to keep moving forward. And the hero can't physically be in all three spots. So whenever he's dealing with one, the other two are moving forward. And like, well, that's a great way to plot an RPG adventure because, right, heroes need to show up at the last moment when everything seems lost. That's because they're heroes. That's how you save the day in the nick of time. So
no, exactly. And I'm so glad, JM, that you mentioned consequence, because I'm always shocked when I talk to game masters, usually game masters who are new or game masters who aren't thinking through everything. And they tell me how their game's out of control because their players did this and they've done that. And I'm like, well, what's the consequence to their actions? Like, what do you mean? I said, you said these guys just rode into town, killed the sheriff, forced the mayor out of his seat and took over the town. What are the consequences? There's no heroes are going to come in and say, what are you guys doing? Yeah. They killed the sheriff. The sheriff has no friends, no family that's going to try to avenge him.
Yeah.
What about the law?
Put a bounty
these guys, these heroes came in and killed the law. There's no other law enforcement, the king and his people, or some, knight errant, or, I mean, come on, think, there's got to be consequences.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for doing this interview. Next time, we're actually going to sit and talk about where the Palladium system came from. If you've got questions or comments, leave them in the under the video, comment here, give us a thumbs up, and we'll incorporate your questions into the outlines and the interviews coming forward. So, Kevin, thank you. This is awesome.
My pleasure.